unfortunately, we've got 6 of us, including me, and 5 seats. And while everyone is coming up to the front, I'll tell you why that's particularly challenging for me. I ran the London Marathon on Sunday. So I think they told me I should be standing up rather than sitting down, but I'm not sure which is less painful. But I wanted to start with that, actually. I first ran the London Marathon about 15 years ago, and on Sunday, it was a very different experience. And it was a very good example of what I would call digitalization or digitization. Everyone spells it in a different way. Starting actually 18 months ago with entries into the marathon pre-COVID, everything was seamless. Everything was digital, right the way through to running the marathon on Sunday and being able to instantly get my result and see every painful mile detailed in the times that I ran. My family, friends were able to follow me for every mile. The results were up instantaneously, and there were 80,000 people running in the marathon, 40,000 actually in London, and another 40,000 worldwide, including someone in Antarctica. And the whole thing was digital, all on my app. So it struck me as a good example of what digitization is, but I'm conscious that everyone has a very different definition in their mind of digitization. So we've got a great panel assembled here, very deliberately from across Maritime. So we've got representation from academia, shipping, government, associations, and maritime businesses. And I'm very excited to hear the collective view on the industry and what digitization is, and also to hear from you guys as well with some time for Q&A. We're going to cover a topic here that's extremely broad and, as I said, particularly ill-defined. So we'll see where we go with it. But what I'd like to discuss is what digitization actually is, what role it plays in shipping, the role of leadership, and the role of purpose. And we're going to use some examples to explore those questions as we go through. So I'm going to start by asking our panel to just very briefly introduce themselves and just give a couple of sentences on what digitization means in shipping to you. I'm going to start with Peter. Oh, I should have started at this end.
Thanks a lot, John. And can I ask you about your time for the London Marathon?
I'll tell you at the end. You can guess.
Okay, that will be the cliffhanger, I guess. My name is Peter Sand. I'm the Chief Shipping Analyst of BIMCO, and I've done 5 marathons as well. Not the London one, I'm afraid. But say my key area of expertise is basically trying to understand what is really going on in the commercial markets. And one of the things that we've talked about at length today, I think, is the collaboration across all stakeholders. And I guess also digitalization is basically just about that. When you ask John about how do we at BIMCO translate digitalization, well, we basically put 3 words to it. We say it's for it's for automation, it's for optimization, and it's for transformation. So I think it also fits very nicely into this whole decarbonization agenda that we have discussed also at length during the sessions today. So Pierre called it an enabler. I think absolutely it's now more than ever a time to embrace digitalization and forget about all those say hurdles. Let's clear them and move on.
Great, thank you, Peter. I'm just looking ahead to how I summarize this definition now, but I guess that's my challenge. Juliana.
Hello, everyone. I'm Juliana Schwenn. I'm the academic here. I'm professor of operations management and supply chain management at the Copenhagen Business School. So I'm going to give you my view, academic view about what I think is digitalization. So from a supply chain management perspective, I would like to see from a helicopter view. So supply chain, so digitalization means connectivity through the application of different softwares. And so all the technologies that we saw today is to create some kind of transparency and visibility across the supply chain. And of course, being connected has its pros and cons. So we want to standardize, but at the same time, standardization also causes other problems. So from the digitalization perspective is how we actually create transparency, connectivity, but at the same time create some kind of value throughout the supply chain.
Great, thanks Juliana.
See, now I'm really curious about which one of you is the fastest one. We'll see.
We'll find out at the end.
All right. My name is Maria Skipper. You met me this morning as well. When I'm the executive director of Danish shipping, so not government, although I deal a lot with governmental affairs. When I saw the questions, I actually looked up the definitions and the meaning of the two words digitization and digitalization, because I'm not a native speaker, but I knew that there is a difference, there is a nuance, a difference between the two words, and I wanted to get my head around it. And the definition that I found was that digitization is when you digitize information, you convert the information from a physical format into a digital one. So basically, that's step one, and going from perhaps, some physical documents, as we've heard examples on earlier today, into perhaps a more digital process. Whereas digitalization is the process of leveraging digitization to improve your business processes. So you're at the next level here. Then coming back to the discussion, this is where I think this is really, really a cool session, leadership. Because although we may have passed step one, moving from physical documents into more electronic versions, clouds, etc., then in terms of leadership or lack of it, we sometimes, we're still at point one. We're still at the digitization where we should actually be at the digitalization process. Some of our front runners, I think we've heard excellent examples today, but I think we can also conclude from today's discussions that only part of the industry is there.
Great,
Thank you.
Thanks, Maria. And I think those two definitions are very helpful. We're definitely talking today about the latter. So Juliana talking about creating value. And then I don't think you mentioned technology particularly, Peter. It was much more about the impact that it can have. So I think the second of the definitions is what we're focusing on today. Alberto.
Yeah. Good afternoon. My name is Alberto Pérez. I work in strategy and business development in Inmarsat Maritime. So for us, digitalization is, given our history, is first and foremost about safety on board ships and about crew welfare. Then, I'm piggybacking on the presentation that we made earlier. Digitalization is about an opportunity to optimize processes, to optimize an industry where information is as dispersed as we've seen in shipping, and an opportunity to make the right thing. And in this case, of course, decarbonizing be a better actor for the planet.
Great, thank you, Alberto. Getting ready with my summary.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. I'm Loris Di Maio and I'm the Head of Operational Excellence for V.Ships. For us, digitalization is a process, yes. It's bringing digital technologies, enabling shipping to become safer, more reliable and more efficient. But the perspective that we always keep in mind is the people. And that's why I really like Per presentation in the last part. We are a people company. Our own asset is our people, and those are the people that are actually bringing the digitalization live. This is where I feel leadership comes through, and this is where I really think this panel is probably the most amazing way of bringing this to life as well. Yeah, thanks.
Great, thanks, Loris. So I'm not going to try and summarize that. Actually, I think they're all great definitions, and there are some elements in there around value creation, technology, people, processes, collaboration. We can boil it down into your definition. I'm going to ask you to read your second definition out again, Maria, because I think it's the best, tightest one, and we'll go with that for today.
Okay, will help from Uncle Google. Just I just want to make that clear. So, digitalization is the process of leveraging digitization to improve business process.
Great. I'm going to add a little bit at the end of that, which is to drive value, whether that's safety or efficiency or crew welfare or whatever it might be. So no wonder then that with multiple definitions across the industry and multiple stakeholders, and we've just picked 5 here, but there are hundreds and hundreds of stakeholders, that leadership is critical to defining and driving digitalization. And I'd like to ask the panel just to pick up on that. And maybe we start with Anne-Maria on where you left off around the importance of leadership. And perhaps you can just expand on why leadership is important in bringing these themes together and executing digitalization.
Well, because it's a process of change, and change is probably the most difficult process within any organization, even in families. So within any organization, I think it's embedded in our human psychology. So when you go for, and especially within an industry, so conservative as shipping is, and with people, with a long tradition, people being in the industry, business operational models being developed hundreds of years ago, as we also heard earlier today, then you really need leaders that have the courage to go in front and actually show that this is the way. There should also be room for mistakes, because if you are sticking your head out, there will be mistakes made. They may cost the company money. I mean, how will the management then handle that? But in any case, you need very strong leadership, taking the lead, and then letting this process drizzle down through the organization with good examples and guidance from the bottom and up. But definitely, if you do not, on the other hand, you can turn it around and say, if you don't have leadership commitment, you won't be successful.
Great, thank you. Perhaps we'll hear from the academic perspective on the value of leadership. I'm hoping we're going to get to a consensus here across the panel that leadership is important.
Yeah, great. So I said about value creation here. The digitalization is shaping the way we do business. So the business that we're talking about is not only about the business models, but it's also being able to take different capabilities. So we're talking about digitalization, we talk about technology here. So we're all very good at doing technology, but the world is very, very different. We have services, we heard a lot about services today. And then now it's about the coupling of products, the ship itself, with the services that we offer. So if we look at from the supply chain, we'll have suppliers that are supplying things through our world, be technology, be services, and we are offering services, a product or a value proposition to our customers, whoever we're doing that. So there is this multiple perspective of what these values are and how can we go together to create this business model for a win-win situation for everyone. Not everyone can win. Not everyone's, at some point, someone's going to lose. So being leader now for the future, including students for the future, they are all multi-skilled. So they're not just good at engineering, they're not just good at marketing, they're not just good at finance, they need to be good at everything. And so being leader in this aspect is not necessarily being good at everything, but being human enough to have a cultural sensitivity to allow the whole team to grow so they can be, to make a value even more prominent for those at the future. That's what I think leadership should be.
Thank you. I'm going to turn to Alberto from Inmarsat now, and we've talked broadly there across the industry and from academia. Alberto, within a business like Inmarsat, where arguably, you're starting from that technology, connectivity starting point, how does leadership, what role does leadership play there in digitalization?
Yeah, again, for us, leadership is about making the right thing. When it comes to digitalization, given the role that we play in connectivity in maritime, for us, the first element is to make possible in the oceans what is possible at land. And that's a responsibility that we need to take to make this happen in maritime. But there is the element as well of creation value, and of course to make sure that we do whatever is possible in our hands to make that everyone wins in this process. And back to what you said of sticking our neck out, we are really trying to do that. As we said earlier, we're investing heavily in getting more connectivity out there, making possible things that were not possible a few years ago, but also investing in a platform, free, making digitalization possible in maritime.
Great, thanks, Alberto. I wonder if we could just also hear from Peter and the BIMCO view, and then we're going to get into some specific examples of where leadership is present and how that drives a successful digitalization, and where it isn't. So we'll get into some stories, and I know how the maritime community love their stories, so we're going to bring it to life after Peter, you've said a few words.
At BIMCO, we would like to make some sort of distinction between what is leadership in terms of say inventing new solutions and presenting new ideas, and then basically showing leadership in the implementation of it. Because I think it's super important that if you set yourself to do something, you need to show leadership in implementing whatever. And I guess that goes across every single thing that you need to do, whether it's a digitalization process of your company, of your industry as such, across the supply chain networks, but implementation, leadership, step by step, is, I guess, of utmost importance. And I guess giving an example also from my own backyard in terms of the supply chain crunch that we see in container shipping right now, very much focus on the US West Coast terminals, of course, where they do not work 24 hours a day. And they basically thought out only yesterday that, hey, why don't we work 24 hours a day? It's like, well, you may have thought of that earlier. And then a few weeks later, they basically say that, hey, we have a few issues implementing this because we need truck drivers to work 24 hours a day too. So implementing all those smarts idea, I guess, is at the center of action. I mean, go for the implementation if you want things to change. If not, don't go at all.
Great. So it's hard, right, driving digitalization?
Super
and
hard.
It's complex, and you have to bring multiple different parties together. And to do that, you need strong leadership in order to make it happen.
Across the board.
Yeah. Loris, that's probably a good segue actually into you. I wonder if you could bring that to life a little bit with maybe a case study, a project in a business which is maybe complex, siloed, set in its ways. So Loris and I used to work for the same business. He knows what I'm talking about. But it's those characteristics are common in many businesses, not just in marine, but all over, lots of industries. Can you just tell us a bit about the role that leadership can play in those situations to drive change, Loris?
Sure. So leadership set the direction, but they also need to follow through on how the direction is implemented. And that's why I think, Peter, your point was absolutely spot on. An example of that, we at V Group, we have 600 vessels in management, 44,000 seafarers, and more than 60 offices with 3,000 office employees. It's quite a big pool of people and asset, actually. We have our own in-house developed system. ShipSure is our ERP, and this has been implemented across all the fleet in 2018 onwards. Of course, that was not an easy process because it included different culture, different people, different companies, different business units, and the landscape was quite complex. But how did we manage to do that? How did we manage to get on board all the 600 vessels? Because the management of change started with the leaders. Our CEO, our chairman of all the board were the first one asking daily almost updates on how the situation was going, how the results were going, how much actually the people on the floor, on the ships that are the most important, were actually using the system. And this is where then you drive the change and not just putting out there. There's a difference between setting the direction, then not disappearing, but probably going back to the day-to-day business and setting the direction and following through, making sure that things are actually becoming reality for the people, the end user of the system. So that's I think, the quite powerful example, because it was a massive coordination of effort from thousands of people to drive this change.
So I know the case study quite well. My other observation is there wasn't just one leader.
And there were many involved, and that was adding complexity, and this is where leadership needs to speak with one voice and set in one direction. And I know that sounds kind of normal, but sometimes it's not, and that's where we as a company came out strong of that, because we had one direction to follow from the leadership team speaking with one voice.
And I think it's hard enough in one business, one company, which was that example. Peter, I'm going to go back to you and maybe ask you to give an example of a cross-industry digitalization project where you've all of the issues that Loris talked about, but they're compounded by having multiple different stakeholder bodies and entities involved.
BIMCO is a true supporter of IMO, and I guess that Maria also mentioned earlier today that IMO is no stronger than all the parties involved in IMO. But one thing that I would like to promote in this case from IMO showing leadership is surely to deliver this IMO compendium, which I'm sure is known to most people in here. Making that, it's not a new document, it's actually an old document, but making that into the foundation of future digitalization of the industry. The one base layer that all solutions should be built on top of. Because that is the common language for a, standardization process, one that can then drive forward an industry-wide digitalization process, one that is not nation-based only or regionalized, but one that delivers something globally for a truly global industry, and delivering also leadership from the BIMCO side of this. BIMCO basically delivered also industry needs into that IMO reference data model. So it is super useful for anyone who would like to, say, contribute to the digitalization process of the industry going forward by making use of that reference model as the base layer upon which all other, say, solutions should be built upon.
Great, thanks, Peter. I'm going to just open it to the panel in case people have either good examples or bad examples where we can highlight again the importance of leadership.
Okay. No, go ahead. Oh.
Fighting over the microphone.
Okay, well, thank you.
That was leadership.
I have a good and a bad one. So which one do you wanna?
Let's start with the bad one, and
I'll start with the bad one. I think Andreas this morning he touched a little bit upon it. The European single window, which was supposed to basically to address the fact that when you enter European ports, there are so many documents, there are so many reporting formalities. And some of them are the same, and I think he said the captain will have to state his name in a document 150 times before he's left European ports again. That's ridiculous. I think there is even a port where you have to somehow report on how much sugar you have on board. Why? But in any case, the EU took upon itself to try to harmonize and to create one single window. Did the EU succeed to a certain extent, it's a bit better today, but due to lack of leadership and due to some member states sticking to their national sovereignty and not wanting to give up on some specific reporting formalities, we still do not have one single window. We have several single windows, but still for each country. So I would say that's a bad example, even though this industry was kicking and screaming and asking for, cut the red tape here, but didn't succeed.
It does sound like an example where strong leadership would make all the difference.
Exactly, definitely. And then the good one.
Yeah.
Yep. Then, I don't know if it's polite, but I would like to take an example from Danish shipping. I talked about it this morning, the MRV regulation, where cargo carried is part of the reporting, as opposed to the IMO data collection system, where it's not. It's a proxy, AER. At Danish shipping, we have since 2008 actually asked our members to report their fuel consumption and deadweight tonnage. That's what we started out with. That was simply to get an overview of where are we in terms of emissions for the Danish operated fleet. Then came the proposal from the Commission for the MRV in 2013. But we knew that they were, that was under preparation. So from 13, we asked our members to include cargo carried in reporting in order to be prepared for when the regulation actually came into force in 2015. And it took a while, to explain to our members why this would be a good idea, why this was, shouldn't be, not another admin burden, etc. And we succeeded, and we actually got data which is, quite good, and we do have an overview. And the most important thing is that we can actually explain why the emissions have actually increased, because we can show that at the same time we also transported more goods. Otherwise, what cannot be explained cannot be defended. So I think that's a good example.
I'm going to come back to this theme in a moment, but it sounds like you had a vision, which maybe other people didn't share at the start, but that by the time you got to the end of the project, the vision was fulfilled.
Exactly. I mean, especially among our members, but I'm still to this day being taking a lot of heat of actually gotten the cargo carried into the MRV regulation.
Yeah. So hold that thought, guys. We're just going to go back to leadership with Juliana, and you were fighting over the microphone before. This better be a good example.
Here now. Okay. And so instead of giving you an example, I would like to share a story. Perhaps is an effort that we have been doing here in Denmark to understand how we can help the Danish industries in servitize, meaning how we can bring in the services into the products. Okay, the products is ship, and then we'd like to look at the suppliers, because it's not only the ship owners, but also all the other suppliers that supply things to the ship. So throughout this year, about in 2000, actually in early 2000, nobody ever even heard of services, because services, I mean, engineering, and we're good at designing technology. Who cares about services? I mean, it's free, right? And then suddenly, with the service economy, the industry started saying, okay, actually, we can make a lot of money just from services, because it's easy, it's quick, and so let's figure out how we can incorporate services coupled together with the ship through some kind of value proposition creation, so we can do something together, products and services, ships and services. Now, what happened now with the COVID is that we have realized that, okay, all the companies, and most of the companies, they started to say, okay, we need to do something with the services. We can also do advanced services. So those services that you have to pay a little bit more, how do we actually provide more value to our customers through services? So what COVID did is that accelerated the process with the digitalization. How do we actually use digitalization technology software to accelerate this whole notion of a product through digitalization and add more value to the customers. So from the supply chain perspective, then what's happening is that, okay, companies, the leaders are saying, wow, sounds like a great idea because we can increase our revenue, which is true. You can, just by adding services from the consumer's perspective or customer's perspective, wow, we're getting our money's worth because, they're providing more services. Now, however, the catch here, which is the failure from the leadership, is if the leaders do not understand what the capabilities of the company, what kind of resources that are needed to go from a transition, technology transition may take 10, 20 years to get there. Services, much shorter life cycle, month or two, you can, even sometimes it's free. So the catch here is services and digitalization together, are they considered cost drivers or performance drivers? The leaders who do not understand that thinking is a cost, then they're not going to find enough resources to make this realization of digitalization happen.
So what I'm hearing there are some qualities of leadership that are required around ensuring that the resources are available, having the vision, bringing together the right entities and stakeholders together. There's this whole series of things that are required in order to achieve the objective. You mentioned COVID there, and I think all of us will have seen examples of great leadership, teams stepping up through the crisis, whether that's on the vessel or whether it's our own companies. I mean, I've seen lots of these examples of businesses moving to home working over a weekend, companies, well, look at our seafarers and the role that they've played. Lots of examples in COVID. And actually leadership is something that seems to have also broken through during the crisis. But very often, your point around purpose or vision is riding right alongside this point around leadership. And so I just wanted to turn our attention to purpose. I'm just going to tell a quick anecdote from V Group, actually, where we spent about 18 months trying to persuade a crew on a ship to fit a cable from the top of the ship down into the belly of the ship. And there were emails and there were calls and there were pretty much in every port the ship was told you need to fit this cable. 18 months later it hadn't been fitted, and the crew were told that they would have free Wi-Fi if the cable were fitted in the boat. And it took 3 hours to fit the cable, right? So all of a sudden you have a group of people who are united around a common goal and common purpose. Things can happen and change very quickly. And I hear hints of that in all of the stories, actually, that there's a clear vision or a purpose that keeps everyone going and sustains them, often, which is set by the leader. So I wonder, Alberto, whether you could pick up on that point and talk a little bit about the importance of purpose in digitalization.
Yeah, I think it's essential. All the reasons we see why certain projects succeed and some other fail are at the end related to leadership. So any project needs to start with leadership. From our perspective, with a clear challenge or a problem that you need to solve, clearly identified. Then you need to empower the teams. You need to be ready to challenge yourself and follow through, and then execute. But without leadership and without a clear goal, then it will always drift away. So it's down to the leadership to set up the purpose of it.
Does that resonate, Loris, with you?
Yeah, very much. And I just would like to add that, so we said before that leadership should set the direction. But when it comes to purpose, leaders should also be the ones seeing things that other people don't see. And that's why they are the leaders. And it's their mission to make sure that those things and their direction is translated into the day-to-day operation of the people. They have to explain why we do things in a certain way. And this comes back to making sure that the vision is translated into something that is really impacting my job. Otherwise, we'll just stay as a poster on the wall and values and that are not really lived by the company. So I think this is where purpose, I think we have a lot of purpose in what we're trying to do here and in our industry. We are not, let's say, looking for other big obstacles or challenges. So the purpose of actually fulfilling them is here. It's just about us to explain to our people on board in the office at every level why we are doing things, simply because it's also on their, they probably don't see the same problems in their day-to-day job. So it's just part of the leader to explain this purpose, because we have a lot of purpose and a lot of things to do.
Anything to add, Peter?
I guess adding to this in terms of the purpose, I mean, naturally it's paramount. I think we've all experienced plenty of nice ideas in terms of implementing new ways of communicating also internally in our organization, our companies or associations, just for say the first step before moving into to wider integration. But if there's no purpose of making use of a digital tool, then it naturally ceases to exist in some way. It basically just dies out. So if there is no purpose, if no one sees the point of sharing this, I guess Swagger was mentioned as one of the say more successful tools in an association to have that say local water cooler where you meet when you cannot meet in real life. I guess that is one of the say the successful ones. But then again, the purpose is for the people to make purpose out of it. It doesn't come only from leadership. I mean, at some point in time, leadership have to let go of it, and it needs to have its own life. And that's when it really makes a purpose for those that are involved and those that contribute and take something away from it. So sharing is caring, I guess.
But there should basically be a balance between the carrot and the stick. Because the carrot should be, in my view, that's the purpose and the meaningfulness. But sometimes you also need leadership with the stick, because there might be some reluctance, some even resistance, and even counterproductive behavior within an organization. And you need to, as a leader, to actually, to be able to identify it and then to react upon it and change the behavior, or simply just say goodbye to whoever it is. I mean, that is part of it as well.
You've got to make the hard decisions as well as the easy ones.
Definitely.
We've got about 4 or 5 minutes left for this topic. I'm going to open it to the floor and see if there are questions or comments. So.
I just wanted to share a little bit of a story on the IoT side, because as we were developing IoT digitalization, it's all together. And I can tell you from the leadership aspect of what you're saying, it's all 100% true. What we found was the enlightened leaders, the one that were educated on all the technology, and the more you got them excited about the prospects and the return on investment, they drove the program. If you didn't have a champion, you were having a lot of trouble getting the pickup of the project to begin with. And part of it was fear of losing their job if things didn't go well. You know, the project falls apart halfway through, they have to shut it down, job losses, people get fired. I mean, this is a real thing they think about. We sometimes forget that, you know, we're all this in this industry, and we're pushing new things on people that are not used to seeing new things. And when people aren't used to seeing new things all the time, they're reticent to get there. So, you know, I've had many conversations with our internal champions, and they're like, you guys better pull through for me, because if this falls apart, you know, I'm gone. right? And I think that's really part of the stumbling blocks to all of this, is the speed at which we deploy any new technology is all dependent on how many trailblazers exist within a given company.
Yeah, and there's some qualities in there that we haven't really got into around what do we mean by leadership. So I guess the opposite of fear is courage.
Right. Certain company
passion.
cultures are not open to letting this type of behavior go on. So you won't be able to move forward with those companies. Those will be the followers, not the leaders.
Yeah, and I've also heard people say, not just in this industry, but others, that breeding those types of leader, the ones that will take risks, be courageous, lead from the front, most industries, most companies, many companies don't breed that kind of leader.
No, and our industry is quite old, so just keep in mind all the processes have been around forever. It's ingrained, and how do you train it? Because you have to train it top down, but then the top has to believe, but also the mid-level management, and then they have to train everyone down to the bottom. I mean, we'd have people drilling holes right through the center of a device because they just couldn't understand that there was a chipboard in there. And the quick explanation is, if you wanted to stick a cell phone to your vehicle, are you going to drill 2 screws into it and screw right through the screen into the dash of the car? And this is the kind of thing, it's a small thing, but it's an expensive thing. And you know, $90,000 later, right? So these are just, you know, simple from the ground up, which was said earlier. Your bottom level, your lowest common denominator, have to really understand everything all the way to the top.
Just building on that, a question that springs to mind back to the panel is how do we as an industry build the kind of leadership qualities that this gentleman was talking about there? And it's not just courage, it's also authenticity. You know, we've all read leadership books. You know, there's a long list of qualities of great leaders, and we think of great leaders from the past and the qualities that they had. How do we breed leaders like that in marine, do you think? Other than the 5 of you, of course.
I think leaderships come from the inside. It's not something you sign up for a training course and then become a natural leader. You lead from the front line because you can do so. Full stop.
Just picking up on that, Peter, I agree with that. And going back to COVID, it does feel like the gorilla was let out of the box during COVID for many of us, including me. Things were different in COVID. You know, the general rules didn't apply. The hierarchy subsided. People took more risks because they had to. We were all in, and some of us still are, in sort of reactive crisis mode. But it feels like that, in some people, COVID brought out the best in people, and leadership came out. We had this very immediate crisis. And yet we have other crises, like, to pick a few, the seafarers that we're still all talking about the seafarers, or sustainability, or digitization, which are not so immediate, but they require all the same qualities of leadership. Is there something we can learn from the last 18 months that helps us build those leaders, or recognize the characteristics and apply them to other situations, do you think?
Could I add to
Big
that?
question.
Yeah, it's really a hard question, but from education's perspective, I think leadership, we could also teach students, not teach, but give them the environment to understand what does it mean to be a good leader, because in the future, they will be the leaders. So from an educational perspective, I think universities, we have a role in shaping that. And so, like you said, no one is born to be a leader, but there are definitely some skills that we can teach: how to be culturally sensitive, how to respect others, how do you build trust, that kind of issues. I think we cannot build leaders, but we can definitely find a way to educate them or teach them to be a better people.
Yeah, great.
I think we should differentiate between leaders, because in a certain way we're all leaders because you have a responsibility within your organization. You can be top management, or you could be the one who calls the shots at the end of the day. It's also your, ASS on the line if something goes wrong, because you have a board to answer to. But you have to, you lead downwards. But as employees, you need to lead upwards. And you also need to lead to the sides, to your colleagues. So in a way, we're all leaders, but it's a matter of defining, your area of responsibility or your level of responsibility. And then I think traditionally, if shipping again, there has been a tendency to promote, the best technician will become the CTO. Well, he's definitely perhaps not the best, or she is not the best leader, just because he or she is a very, very good technician or naval architect or whatever. So I think, just like Peter, this is something that comes from the inside. You cannot study to become a good leader. Perhaps you can study to become a good manager, but a leader is your personal authenticity, your integrity, and your courage to make wrong decisions sometimes.
Great, thank you.
I think, John, to close off on your question, I think if there is one learning after these 18 months as an industry is that we haven't succeeded so well to speak with one voice and to take one single direction out of the issues that we still have in front of us. And of course, I don't have the answer to this because it's a major coordination of different entities, parties, business, etc. But we could and we need to do better because the problems ahead cannot be solved by one company, one segment of our industry, so we need to find a way to create this collaboration.
Great, thanks, Loris. I think we're coming to a close, so to summarize, we started off talking about digitalization or digitization, and we worked out which one we should be talking about. We agreed it was much broader than just technology, and it was about people, systems, processes, collaboration, culture, and all the other words that we used. But luckily we had a Google definition, which was helpful when we added the point around value. We talked a lot about leadership and agreed it was critical, and we heard some stories of situations where leadership was present and where it wasn't. We talked a bit more about what leadership was, which was a topic I'd have loved to have continued to talk about. It's a very broad topic. And then we heard about purpose and the importance of purpose. And then we finished by thinking about what have we learned over the last 18 months and how can we apply it to the future. So I'd like to thank the panel. Really interesting conversation. And thanks for your questions.